Good morning, gentlemen. Or actually, I don't know what time it is when you watch this, but I hope all is well. I hope that you and your families are safe. This is our final lecture of chapter 7. So, for today's purposes, I'm going to finish up the slides. You could finish up your notes. And then essentially, the big thing that's going to occur this week is I'm going to post the at home, essentially, the last essay test. So for today's purposes, you just have to watch this and take notes, and your official classwork, which you'll have up until tomorrow night, Tuesday evening, to submit, will just be to submit your final notes. So I could see a copy that you've been keeping up to date with all your PowerPoint notes. So either sometime on Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm going to be posting up that essay that will either be due on Thursday or Friday, depending on what day it comes up. So just keep your eye out for it. I'll put it up both on Google Classroom and on portals, and pretty much that'll take us through most of the week. So with that said, last time, just as a really quick review that we met, we went over the 9 basic rights of workers. So the right to the livable wage, the right to the Sabbath rest, a right to a safe workplace. We talked a little bit about a specific older issue around the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire. We also said that the 4th right is the right to be able to maintain your moral principles, essentially to find employment in which you don't have to compromise your beliefs. The right to unemployment. So in case if you're unwillingly unemployed, you have the right to be compensated for that. The right to a pension and insurance. Catholic Church recognizes that healthcare is a basic human right. Again, the church doesn't mandate how that should be implemented, but it says it's up to the governments and the private sectors to work together to figure out a solution. And finally, the last 3 were maternity and the workplace, and really all types of maternity and paternity, but really essentially some type of insurance that the family has enough time so that work doesn't interfere with being fruitful and developing a family. A right to assemble unions, a right to assemble. And then the 9th one is the right to strike. But that right to strike should never have violence, should never be done just for political agendas, and should only be done as a last resort in order to secure wages. So for today's purposes, we're going to talk a little bit more about abuses against the dignity of the worker. So first of all, one of the worst comes out of child labor. And according to the World Health Organization, 1 out of 6 children worldwide are forced or work. Okay, and which we obviously know is illegal. In some of the worst cases, that child labor will be in the form of enslavement or trafficking, where children are held in bondage to help pay a family's debt. In some places where they're recruited as soldiers, or when they're forced into pornography. So it's really, really horrible. I think it's quite clear how this violates their dignity. In Rerum Novarium, Pope Leo XIII, who we say is like the modern day founder of Catholic social teaching, really explicitly went on record to condemn child labor. Again, that was during the Industrial Revolution, where child labor was rampant. We tend to think that today in 2020, this isn't an issue, but I know some of you did reports on human trafficking, and you know that this, unfortunately, in today's day and age, really still is an issue. It's not as prevalent as it was historically, but children are trafficked for labor or sex trade purposes, and it's a disgusting abuse of human dignity. Abuse is in adult labor. So what does abuse look like in adult labor? In the worst cases, obviously adults are are involved in trafficking for either sex purpose, trade purposes, or they're exploited and trafficked in for severe working conditions. However, sometimes you have people who work by their own means and want to work and want to be fairly compensated and just are not. They're abused. Labor exploitation for adults often comes in the form of low wages or unsafe working conditions. We also see intimidation by employers to try to get their employees to not report abuses or not form unions. So that's what abuse in adult labor looks like. In the United States, probably one of the largest populations that have abuse are your domestic workers. So what that means is anyone who would work in a home, so your nannies, your cleaning women, possibly a home cook, oftentimes these individuals are possibly here illegal. So employers take advantage of that and really pay them subpar, put like really just unfair pay scales and really have them in these extremely long hours. So that's kind of one of those hidden mysteries. So I'm going to pause for a second. There's an interesting documentary that's fairly recent about the case for abuse in domestic workers, and we're just going to watch like the first 2.5 minutes of it. But I think you might say, oh, this is America. Or like, yes, people might not get, might people at least have a minimum wage, but that abuses are still occurring, and I think the domestic worker is an example of this. Okay.
I've been a nanny for 9 years. What I like is that you get to care for the kids, you get to help educate them, but I never expected the conditions here to be what they are.
What do we want? Respect. We need respect. We need developed rights, and we need justice.
After working for 20 years in my country as a bus conductor, I decided I couldn't find a job. That's why I end up here in the United States looking for work. And what work did I find when I come? Working as a domestic. Domestic workers work long hours. You have to be at the house that you're working before your employer leave in the morning, and you have to be there when your employer returns. You're still on the job.
The domestic workers, it includes nannies, babysitters, cooks, bottle washers, elderly caregivers. Anyone that works in someone else's home is considered a domestic worker.
There are two sectors of people that are not covered under the labor law. That's domestic workers and the farm laborers. And that's why a lot of people get away with things, because if you don't have anything to hold on to, if you have to report incidents, because you are considered less than a worker.
I don't get paid much. I work 12, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, no days off, and I pay $200, by the way.
People that say to you, this child is the most precious thing that I have, and they're giving you $350, $400 for working 50, 55 hours a week for cooking, cleaning, and doing house care. When they would spend a couple of $100 a night going out at places that most nannies, the closest we can get to it is past the outside of the building.
Because so many domestic workers are undocumented, they use immigration as the tool above their heads. Some of them are forced to sleep on the floor in the employer's homes. Some of them are not fed enough food or not fed at all. Some of them are forced to go to work when they're sick, because if you don't go to work, you don't get paid.
What do we want? What do we want? We want justice, and we want it.
Okay, so hopefully you see that this exploitation still occurs today. If some of the conditions they mentioned, that the one younger woman who said she worked 7 days a week, so there's the loss of her right to the Sabbath rest. That she worked 12 to 15 hours a day, so clearly long wages. And in her case, she was only paid I think she said $200 or $250. The other women who were working, again, 50, 55 hours a week and only making $400 a week, and were tending to children, we're cooking, we're cleaning. So really, you see that this is a particular area where present day we still see these abuses. So finally, the last end I want to work is abuses occur on both ends. Abuses occur from the employers, but we also see abuse by workers, and the church also is against that. So we see, for example, white collar crimes occur. White collar is a term used to apply to types of jobs that are more intellectual based. So the hence is you'd wear a suit and tie, hence the term white collar. But nonetheless, so whether you're stealing intellectual property or you're doing illegal trades, but those, or you're ciphering money from firms, those are your white collar crimes. You also just have basic slacking off at work, when you're on an employer's time and you're not producing. Whenever you take company equipment or property without permission. And we even see unethical practices by teen workers. I mean, I can remember you always knew the friend who would let you in the back of the movie theater, or maybe the person that would give you some free food at the fast food restaurant. So, and again, like it's easy, it's very easy to fall into sin, even as a teen. So it's important to really try to develop a higher ethical and moral standard associated with that. So, as we move forward, the workplace and families. The families are at the center of the Christian life. The Catholic Church calls families the domestic church. They are the foundations of society. And basically, the church's position is that work should not hinder family, either by low wages or short maternity leaves or long hours. Employers have an obligation to promote the family life. Remember, we are created as human beings not to live fruitful lives. We're not created for the sole purposes to produce. Workplace and the women. So a common term sometimes is that there's a glass ceiling for women, which means it looks like women are equal, but some women in certain fields still, they have a glass ceiling that's holding them down in place. You can't see it, but what it looks like is sometimes women who have the right and adequate training or equal opportunities are not always advanced. Equal pay, some women don't always receive the equal pay that their male counterparts would. And unfortunately, some women endure sexual harassment. So whereas obviously women have made significant progress in the workplace, we have to still always remember and be aware to make sure that glass ceilings are not existing. And finally, workplace and the immigrants. When it comes to, let me move this up. When it comes to immigration, the Catholic Church is absolutely against exploiting workers because they are immigrants. And we really saw how the domestic workers in this country who are here illegally are just really almost treated as slaves. That woman working 7 days a week for $200, 12-hour days, that's slavery. Church, I mean, she's paid, so it's not technically slavery, but it's significant abuse. What the church claims is immigrants have the same rights of citizens, not because of their legal status, but because of their human dignity, because they're made in the image and likeness of God. So so we actually saw in this video many different types of abuse. So we know, just to kind of wrap this up, justice and the economic society. What I liked about, if you saw in that short excerpt that we watched on the domestic workers, they were chanting, "We want justice, we want justice," because a just economic society is one in which both unbridled capitalism does not occur. But yet we don't resort to socialism. So unbridled capitalism, as we already know from Pope Leo XIII in Rerum Novarum, is unacceptable. When there are no regulations or restrictions, this leads to worker exploitation or total loss of rights. So unbridled capitalism, not good. However, capitalism put in check with some of these types of protections is absolutely okay. Socialism, on the other hand, is not okay. When all of the production are controlled by the government, abuse and exploitation of workers occur. And we saw Pope Leo XIII again directly talking against this. So the purpose of any economic system is to serve the human person, not the corporation. The purpose of any economic system is to serve the human person. Pope Benedict XVI tells us every economic decision has a moral consequence. I'll say that again. Every economic decision has a moral consequence. Greed, which is this desire for earthly goods that goes way beyond what we need. Consumerism, social and economic order that encourages the purchase of goods in just greater and greater amounts, leads to a culture of waste. We saw this in the last chapter of poverty. It leads to a culture of waste, and it leads to unfair workplace conditions in order to support this culture of waste. So finally, we're just close with two different quotes. This is a quote from Justice in the Economic Society. Jesus said to the crowd, it's a quote from the Bible, but it's used here. Take care to guard against all greed, for though one may be rich, one's life does not consist of possessions. So you have to really remember the purpose of life here is to establish God at the center of your life, to establish firm and loving relationships, and then to go out and work to provide for enough means for those relationships to flourish and to use your God-given talents. And then finally, this is just a quote here that basically the essence of this is that if you have Christ in your life and you pray and you participate in your community life in a Christ-like way, and you read the scriptures and you share the love of Christ with others, then you will live an obedient life that no matter what your career is, if this is the way you organize yourself, whether you don't make a lot of money or you are very affluent, you will always be in the right place because work will have its proper place because Christ will be at the center of your life. Okay, gentlemen, we are officially done with chapter 7. Like I said, sometime between today and Tuesday evening before midnight, you need to, for your classwork number 4, will simply be to submit a copy of your notes just so that I could know that you've kept up with it. And then either Tuesday or Wednesday, I will put up your big assessment for the week. All right, gentlemen, have a wonderful day.